What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Toma Todito Boxing Show. Thank you guys again for joining me. And let's recap the last Crescendo, which took place Saturday out in Saudi Arabia. A card that had a handful of what I consider a handful of fights that, in my opinion, they could have been their own main events on any given night. It offered a lot of drama in the lead up where we had two fighters that end up falling out. And we're going to talk about all that. And of course, the big news, Dmitry Bivol hands the first defeat to Artur Beterbiev's record and career. Something that I never thought I would witness. In my opinion, I would tell friends and buddies and other people that I would get into discussions about boxing that, in my opinion, Artur Beterbiev was going to retire undefeated with the belt. Being that he's already in the later stages of his career, he's an older fighter. I believe he's 40 now, and I just didn't see him losing the amount of power that he ends up delivering to his opponents. And the way that he crumbles his opposition is just something that I thought I was going to witness here. And we almost did. It didn't change. A lot of people were saying fighters tend to get old within a matter of one fight. We were going to see a deteriorated, diminished version of Beterbiev on this past Saturday. And that wasn't the case. It was a difference of game plans. Dmitry Bivol picked up where he left off and added a lot more fluidity, added a lot more output than what he presented in the first fight. He handled the pain. He stuck with the game plan. He got hurt. He got busted up. There was several times where Artur Beterbiev looked like he was just going to bring the fight and bring potentially Bivol down to a knee, potentially drop him. But the heart and pride of Dmitry just kept them moving, kept them going, kept them moving around the ring, getting on his bicycle and boxing beautifully. Beautiful combinations. And whether it was him initiating the attack or him delivering suppressive fire, countering, he was delivering 4, 5, 6, 7 punches if he needed to and mixing up his attack head and body, where Beterbiev was headhunting for the majority of the fight. He did land some very good body shots, which ended up dropping the guard of Bivol at several different times throughout the fight, where Beterbiev would capitalize by delivering those powerful headshots and those hooks to the head. But in the end, the majority decision ends up going in the direction of Dmitry Bivol, and he hands. Now these two fighters are responsible for giving each other the first defeat of each of their respective careers. Beterbiev got the best in the unification bout in their last outing, just 4 months back. Gets the best of Dmitry, handing him the first loss of his career and lifting his titles from him. This time, Beterbiev stepped into the ring as the undisputed champion. And by Dmitry getting the majority decision, deservingly so, he is now the king at 175 pounds, dethroning Artur Beterbiev. Beautiful fight. Another pleasure to have sat and watched this fight. These two fighters in a setting where we get to enjoy it in a live setting where they're active fighters, where they're currently active fighters, not a replay, not an old fight, similar to when I sit down and watch some of my favorites like George Foreman and Evander Holyfield when they face off against one another, or in their respective careers when they face off against other opposition, or watching a replay of a Duran Hagler or Duran Iran Barkley, Sugar Ray Leonard, you name it. We get to see this is what people are going to be watching years down the line, telling other generations, I wish I could have seen that live. I didn't get to witness it live per se in Saudi Arabia, but we got to watch it live by way of our television, by streaming the fights, by watching it on the zone in a live setting and in a live broadcast. And we get to enjoy these two active fighters who knows how long we're going to have them, but we're not going to have them for many more years to come. It's either going to be this or maybe next year. Dmitry Bivol may be around a little bit longer. I think Artur Beterbiev, where he's down to the final stretch, maybe this year, maybe next year, that he'll be calling it a career. He's already in the older stages of his life at 40 years old, and usually they start calling it around that time, similar to Gennady Golovkin and so forth. Adonis Stevenson, Sergey Kovalev, some names that come to mind. What a pleasure it was to have witnessed this fight. Beautiful boxing, beautiful display of heart, beautiful display of pride, beautiful display of not willing to cave in and give up and pushing through adversity. More so on the end of Dmitry, because you knew that those power shots that Beterbiev was delivering were hurting Dmitry Bivol. They were visibly damaging him. And in my opinion, it was when I was watching it, I'm like, oh, it's a matter of time. He's coming. He's waking up. And then Bivol would take the punches, would take the damage, gather himself, manage to throw some punches or a combination decent enough to be able to get out of danger's way and survive and keep the fight going and keep taking the fight to his opponent instead of succumbing to the monster that is Beterbiev. And in the end, it pays off because he ends up dethroning the champion. A lot of lessons to take away from such a fight that was fought magnificently and as high a level as you could ever witness and ask for from the sport of boxing. The highest pedigree possible between these two fighters. Complete different styles and complete different arsenals that they bring to the table, and yet it makes for such an intriguing 12 rounds. Just that fight alone delivered. Yet we had a card stacked with fights that, like I said at the beginning, could have been main events in their own right. Another fight that was key for this division was a fight between Joshua Buatsi and Callum Smith, which got the night going for me, per se. That was a fight that I was really interested in because we just saw a few weeks back David Benavidez. Since he moved up, he dethroned Vosdik, who was possibly one of the top contenders at 175 pounds in the light heavyweight division, and a former champion himself who had lost his title, surrendered his title to Artur Beterbiev. Benavidez makes his debut at 175 and gets the decision over Vosdik, outboxing him and cementing himself as a challenger now within this new division that he was campaigning at, or that he is campaigning at. And now a few weeks back, we see him against David Morrell, another former super middleweight who got tired of waiting for Canelo, moves up to 175, and the fight that should have happened at 168, we end up getting at one division north. Benavidez versus Morrell. A very entertaining fight, and Morrell with the victory Benavidez with the victory over Morrell cemented himself as the number one challenger to the throne of 175 pounds, being Artur Beterbiev. Of course, this fight that we're talking about, the LAST CRESCENDO main event, was already scheduled. So Benavidez is on the sidelines waiting to see which one of these two guys is going to be the final champion to be able to give him a shot. Who is he going to be facing off against? He's willing to face off against both. And for those that thought that Beterbiev was going to be successful once again, and we would get a Benavidez-Beterbiev showdown down the line later this year, this is a huge wrench that Dmitry Bivol threw on all those plans. Bivol has now, by lifting the titles from Beterbiev and taking over the throne. Now we're pushing for a trilogy, which leaves David Benavidez with a recent victory and is going to leave him sidelined. Hence, Callum Smith and Joshua Buatsi, and why I'm mentioning that fight. That fight was the opener for me, at least for the televised portion of this last crescendo on Saturday. And it was a very telling fight for me because, like I mentioned Vosdick, Callum Smith was a champion at 168 when Benavidez was starting to make a name for himself there. And Callum Smith had the ring title and one of the major titles. I forget which one of the titles he had. Maybe the WBC, I want to say, or the WBO. I think it was the WBC title and the ring. And Canelo takes it from him, beats him, takes it from him. Callum Smith abandons 168, moves up to 175 where he's had a lot of success. Finally builds himself up to a title shot and loses against Artur Beterbiev. The only two losses of Callum Smith's record to date are against Canelo and Artur Beterbiev. And he was facing off against Joshua Buatsi, who was a big amateur UK standout and has put on an amazing record so far as a professional, stepping into the ring undefeated with a 19-0 record, and he ends up losing the decision to Callum Smith. This is for the WBO interim, which was a former title the former title that belonged to Dmitry Bivol before he lost his two titles to Beterbiev and now has regained all the straps. So now Callum Smith has a rightful claim to fight the champ, whoever sits atop the throne, which now is Dmitry Bivol, similar to the ticket that David Benavidez is sitting with for the WBC as the rightful challenger to the throne. Now that we know that this trilogy is going to happen, more than likely it's either going to come together either in the fall, early fall in September, or another big December showdown out in Saudi Arabia. That takes up the majority of the calendar year, which means, are we really to expect David Benavidez to sit around and lose his momentum this 2025? I doubt it. And that's why this fight between Smith and Joshua Buatsi was so important for me. Because to many that I've been speaking to, they believe that David Benavidez will take a tune-up or a stay busy fight, which would make sense. But David Benavidez doesn't function like that. He wants all the smoke, and he wants to leave no doubt that he is the man. He is the one to beat. So just like he took on Vosdick and he took on Morel, my inclination is that rather than wait, we're going to see Benavidez versus Callum Smith. A fight that maybe should have taken place at 168, but they were in different stages of their careers when Callum Smith was champ at 168. So, in my opinion, my feelings are that we're going to see David Benavidez, Callum Smith take place at some point this year, maybe in the summer, rather than both of them sitting around waiting for the trilogy to take place. Just my inclination. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. Callum Smith, successful unanimous decision over Joshua Buatsi, handing him the first loss of his career in what was a superbly entertaining fight. Then we got Agit Kabayel, who pulls off another huge upset. The man is boxing beautifully and he is in his moment right now. Agit Kabayel pulls off a huge upset, derailing the plans and the boogeyman status of Big Bang Zhang. Drops and stops and damages Zhilei Zhang to the body over and over and over until he drops him to his knees where Zhang could not continue. Big Bang Zhang was brought to his knees in round 6 and did not answer the referee's count. Agit Kabayel is now the man who sits basically on the same level as Daniel Dubois and Joseph Parker, in my opinion. All these names in the heavyweight division, everybody wants a shot at the king in Alexander Usyk, who cemented himself as the king with the second victory over Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury has now announced his retirement. Should he come out of retirement? Well, should he come out of retirement, it's going to be for a mega payday, and that would possibly be the Wembley showdown against Anthony Joshua, which is also another one of the fights that I listed on my dream list of 25 fights I would like to see in 2025. If you haven't checked out that episode, go check it out. It's a couple episodes ago in the, I think it's the last episode that I recorded actually, and you could check it out and tell me what you think. I want to hear your comments. I want to see what your list looks like, or which one of the fights that I listed on there you disagree with. Maybe you disagree with a lot of the list. I don't know, but I give you reasons as to why I put those on the list. And Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua would be one that I would like to see just as a big mega event. Nothing meaningful for the welterweight division. Usyk is going after Dubois. Dubois was supposed to be on this card facing Joseph Parker. Dubois ends up getting sick. 2 days prior, enter Martin Bakole, who is another big juggernaut in the heavyweight division, who basically derailed the young prospect Jared Anderson's when Riyadh made their debut out in LA, and this was the undercard of Crawford Madrimov. Martin Bakole became a star. Martin Bakole answers the call within 2-day notice to step in and face Joseph Parker. A very tough task. Joseph Parker, one of my favorite heavyweights, and you guys know you could check out my catalog. Every time I talk about Joseph Parker, he is just as blue collar as it gets for me. He is just a worker's man. He just shows up, he does his job, he clocks out, goes home. He doesn't mess around. He's there for business. No antics, no nothing. He's always very lighthearted, very humble, very easygoing. Doesn't look like anything phases him. He gets in the ring and just goes to work. Very consistent and doesn't abandon. Communicates well with this corner and just continues and follows the game plan and continues pushing forward. The little engine that could. Joseph Parker just continues doing work. Here goes again. He gets hit. He gets beat. He gets shaken up and dropped, and he doesn't abandon the game plan, sticks with it until he gets the result that he wants, that he's seeking. And that's how he's found so much success. And he's become one of the most popular heavyweights. This fight against Daniel Dubois was going to be something that should have been a mega event on its own, and it happened to be scheduled for this Last Crescendo card. Daniel Dubois gets injured. Enter Martin Bakole, another big pounding heavyweight. Martin Bakole and Zhilei Zhang, hopefully they'll face off against one another down the line. That would be a bombs away type fight. Martin Bakole could have pulled off the upset with those power bombs that he throws. Joseph Parker just went to work, gets another win on his record, 36-3, now 24 knockouts, as he stopped Martin Bakole in the second round. Just put him out. You look at the record and the resume of Joseph Parker and why I'm so big into following Joseph Parker's career and why I cheer for him so much. We now have a second-round knockout of Martin Bakole. He got a majority decision over Zhilei Zhang last year in March. Before that, he beat Deontay Wilder. Simon Keane was his stay busy fight. Faiga Opelu was another stay busy fight for him. Jack Massey, big fight for him. His knockout loss to Joe Joyce was the one that started derailing his career slightly, because prior to the Joe Joyce, his ascension or his trajectory was back-to-back victories over Derek Chisora, his big hometown showdown against Junior Fa, his TKO victory over Alex Lepai. He had 2 successive losses against Anthony Joshua and then Dillian White. But before that, he had beaten Hughie Fury prior to the Anthony Joshua fight. And 2 fights prior, he had the majority decision win when he was young into his career, as was his opponent, majority decision over Andy Ruiz. A rematch that never happened. That was dating back to 2016. Just think about how long he's been around. He was on a trajectory and then ends up succumbing to Anthony Joshua when Joshua was in his heyday. Lost a unanimous decision there. And then Dillian White in the very next outing. Both of these fights were several months apart. Joshua in March of 18, I believe. And then Joshua was in March of 18, and then Dillian White was in the fall of that same year. Both unanimous decision losses. Then he gets on a 6-fight win streak and runs into the juggernaut Joe Joyce, who was also one of the top dogs in the early 2020s. The same Joe Joyce that was ascending in the heavyweight division, who ended up breaking the orbital bone of Daniel Dubois. Since then, Dubois has been on an absolute tear. That's how all these guys end up matching against one another. Martin Bakole has now suffered a defeat at the hands of Joseph Parker, the second defeat of his career. The first defeat of Bakole's career came earlier in his career against Michael Hunter, American heavyweight Michael Hunter. And Joseph Parker cements himself as a top dog. This should have been his fight with Daniel Dubois for his title. Who knows where Joseph Parker is at now, because now he sits as in an interim type status in the heavyweight division. Usyk wants Dubois. Dubois got sick, couldn't make this fight. When he comes back, he is most likely going to go straight into negotiations against Usyk, who he's looking to run that fight back with. A fight that had so much drama in it. That was that famous body shot where many felt it was a low blow, and they gave about 10 minutes to Usyk to recover. Mentally, Dubois thought that he won the fight. Frank Warren was arguing. Dubois thought he did enough. And then Usyk, rather than getting knocked out, where many felt that was it, that he had knocked out Usyk, the unbeatable Usyk, the referee gives him all the time in the world to recover. Many still feel that it was a low blow. Many feel that it was a good delivered body shot. However it is, whatever side of the fence you sit on that argument, Usyk was able to recover, get back into the fight. Dubois mentally checked out, and several rounds later, Usyk puts a stop to him. Dubois drops to a knee, doesn't answer the referee's count, and the fight comes to an end. Then they end up disputing the result of the fight and so forth. Dubois has been looking to run it back since. And he's been on a tear. Now he got sick, falls out of this Joseph Parker fight. Now we don't know where Joseph Parker sits. More than likely, Joseph Parker, rather than getting a shot at a title, my inclination is telling me that we will see Joseph Parker and Agit Kabayel as a co-main event to potentially the Dubois Usyk, rather than Joseph Parker and Dubois rescheduling and renegotiating their contract. Dubois more than likely will move on to the Usyk showdown with the implications of the winner of Parker and Kabayel getting an immediate shot at whoever wins the Usyk-Dubois fight. Usyk wants to oblige that fight with Dubois, feels that there's also unfinished business there because of what I was just explaining, wants to leave no doubt that he will stop and beat Daniel Dubois, and then potentially call it a day himself. He has expressed that he would like to entertain a fight with UFC fighter Alex Pereira, Usyk has. So his career is coming to an end, and he's the king of the heavyweights. He could do as he pleases. He's asking for Dubois. More than likely, we're going to get that negotiation done. Joseph Parker, Agit Kabayel would be an absolute amazing showdown, as would Martin Bakole, who is on the losing end on this card, and Zhilei Zhang facing off against one another. That would be an all bombs away with a good camp for Martin Bakole and a good preparation. You know Zhilei Zhang's ready to throw bombs away, as is Martin Bakole, and that would be a fan favorite showdown. From there, we move on to Shakur Stevenson, whose opponent also ends up falling ill days leading into the fight, and that was young Floyd Schofield, a Golden Boy fighter whom, if you remember, I got a chance to go cover his fight against Reyes Giron out in Las Vegas. That was, I believe, November, several months back. And I got to talk to him. I actually got to interview him where he's asking for the Shakur fight, and then it ends up getting signed. He was in camp. He was in full preparation. Falls ill. And unable to get into the ring this past weekend. And they found a last-minute replacement, which is a young UK-based fighter by the name of Josh Padley, who was bringing in a 15-0 record. Josh Padley became popular late last year when he ended up defeating a big UK prospect by the name of Mark Chamberlain, a super lightweight, 140-pound prospect who had momentum and a good trajectory that he was putting together for himself. Mark Chamberlain was, and Josh Padley was an undefeated fighter, 14-0 at that time, and Chamberlain was 16-0, and Padley ends up dropping him and eventually getting the decision over Chamberlain, handing him the first defeat of his career. That's been the claim to fame for Josh Padley. Other than that, relatively unknown fighter. Comes into this with an undefeated record, 15-0, on a last-minute type setting, within days to be able to prepare and replace Floyd Schofield. And what we saw was the Shakur Stevenson that we've been asking for and missing for so long. This is not the Shakur Stevenson. He's so inconsistent, which is the bad part, that he shows up on one fight and acts defensive and gets on his bike, and that's where we see the Vegas critiques, where he got on his bicycle and made it an unentertaining fight against Edwin de los Santos. And then his last fight in Jersey, which was his final fight with Top Rank, where you had people walking out of the arena and this and that because it's such a boring fight and whatever. This is the Shakur. This version of Shakur that we saw against Padley is the Shakur that those of us that have followed his career fell in love with. This is a Shakur that gets in your face, wants to grind out the fight, has no respect for the opponent, just starts throwing punches in combinations to the body, to the head, mixes up his attack very well, and evades punches while doing so, and just basically beats his opponents to the punch on every succession. And it's so impressive to watch because he's consistently in the line of fire and not getting touched. This is the Shakur Stevenson that we fell in love with, those of us that have supported his career for so long. This version. The one that's willing to engage and willing to fight and take the fight, and it's a mental warfare that he does. He's not just beating his opponents physically, but mentally he's diminishing them every progressing round until the opponents just can't keep going. They just can't beat him to the punch. They can't get away from him. They can't find an opening. And eventually they just start breaking down and Shakur brings the fight to a stop. This is what we saw with Josh Padley. To the credit of Josh Padley, a very minimal camp, very minimal time to be able to prepare. If he had a full camp, I don't see this fight going any other way. And to the young Floyd Schofield, who I'm a big fan of as well, I feel that this fight would have been exactly the same. It would have been fought very similar. Josh Padley did not lose. Yes, he lost the decision on this fight, or he got stopped, I should say. He ends up getting stopped by Shakur Stevenson. But he ends up winning. It's a win-win for him. Josh Padley stands in last minute, gets a big purse, a big payday out of it. And had the crowd cheering for him because of how much heart and pride and willingness he showed to be in there and engage with Shakur Stevenson. Even though he knew that it was a losing effort, he was not going to give way. He was not going to quit until his body just couldn't go anymore. He kept getting up. He kept answering the bell. He kept answering the referee's count. He kept taking the fight to Shakur Stevenson, and knowing that he was just outmatched. And it was a very valiant effort where Josh Padley has now made a name for himself as a warrior. Shakur Stevenson looked every bit as top level pedigree as you could ask for. And he is the WBC champ for a reason in the lightweight division. He is one of the top fighters. Is he the best? I don't think so. I haven't seen Shakur Stevenson challenge anybody to that level. But what we have seen of Shakur Stevenson, he is definitely one of the top fighters in the world and absolutely deserving of being one of the champions in the 135-pound division. With the company like Lomachenko, Tank, and now Keyshawn Davis as the newest champion, who just dethroned Baranchik a few weeks back. Those are the fights that we want to see Shakur in to actually gauge where he's at. He says he's the best in the world. He's just a couple fights and those type of names away from displaying to the world whether he is or he isn't that guy. But the way he looked on Saturday, I hope is the Shakur that we see going forward. That's as entertaining and as masterful as you could ever ask for of a performance from Shakur Stevenson. Josh Padley ends up with a loss on his record now, a stoppage loss at that. But he won. His pockets are full, his bank account looks good, and he has a whole new fan base that will be tuning in. That is going to be tuning in to his next outing, whenever it may be later this year. He's got a whole new fan base now. We move on to Vergil Ortiz and Israil Madrimov. And Vergil Ortiz and Madrimov. Remember that Vergil Ortiz and Boachuk got in this amazing showdown, which should have been fight of the year. It was definitely one of the contenders last summer. A week after, if we remember how this fight came about, Vergil Ortiz was supposed to be on the undercard of the RIYADH'S debut out in LA. He was going to be the co-main event to Crawford Madrimov, Vergil Ortiz and Tim Tszyu. Tim Tszyu gets injured. Golden Boy pulls Vergil Ortiz from the RIYADH card, and a week later ends up having him fight Serhii Boachuk. Crawford Madrimov ends up going all the way to a decision. The points end up being awarded, and the decision ends up going the direction of Terence Crawford, who remains undefeated and picked up a version of the WBA title and I believe also the WBO title. I believe he became interim for both of those straps at 154 pounds, handing Madrimov a defeat. It was such a tight fight where many felt that Madrimov had done enough to have deserved the victory, but if he didn't, many were saying, well, Crawford deserved the victory on points, but he didn't look as good in this new division as we've seen him at welterweight or even at super lightweight. He's biting on more than he could chew. Then we move on to December, where we were supposed to see Madrimov and Serhii Bohachuk. Madrimov falls ill. The same week, or just days after, they had announced that Madrimov was going to be fighting Bohachuk in December and Vergil Ortiz in February. When they announced that, people were losing their minds because Madrimov would have gone from Crawford to Bohachuk to Vergil Ortiz. Legendary status type stuff. Days after that Vergil Ortiz-Madrimov fight gets announced in February, knowing that Vergil Ortiz and Bohachuk were going to face off against each other, Madrimov suffers an injury in camp, as was reported, and Bohachuk was left without a dance partner. Enter Ishmael Davies, another UK fighter that stepped up on short notice and gave a very good account of himself, but Serhii Bohachuk just picked him apart and looked every bit as amazing in his return fight since his big showdown with Vergil Ortiz. We slide forward to now this past Saturday. Madrimov shows up against Vergil Ortiz. It's almost as if he fell ill. I'm not saying he didn't, or that he wasn't injured, but it worked out so perfectly to where it almost seems like he didn't want to risk this Vergil Ortiz fight, knowing that he would have to drain every last ounce of himself in a showdown against Serhii Bohachuk, which would more than likely have been a bloodfest between the two. And he wouldn't be in condition enough to make it to Saturday with Vergil Ortiz. So it was almost convenient to have succumbed to an injury or an illness. I'm not saying that's just conspiratorial. It just seemed that way. I have no proof to back that up. It just seemed that way for me. Hence, Serhii Bohachuk stayed active, beat Ishmael Davies, and now has a rightful claim to Sebastian Fundora as one of the Sebastian Fundora titles. Either the WBC or the WBO that Sebastian Fundora is holding. Murtasaliev has the IBF. Crawford has the WBA. And now Bohachuk lined up to face off against Fundora. Fundora is announced to be facing Cordell Booker, defending his titles, finally getting back in action. Remember, Fundora was supposed to fight Spence, then he was supposed to fight Crawford, then he was supposed to fight Ortiz. Neither one of those happened. Now he's putting his titles on the line late March against Cordell Booker. Serhii Bohachuk is waiting for the winner of that fight so he could get a title shot. But of course, you know that Bohachuk had his eyes on this Saturday's fight between Madrimov and Vergil Ortiz. Vergil Ortiz has a piece of the 154 title as well, an interim version of the title, waiting to get his shot at Fundora himself. Or Crawford, who he's been chasing since his welterweight days. Actually, since Vergil Ortiz was campaigning at 140 pounds, he's been calling out Crawford. And that fight hasn't happened. Now they both have a piece of the 154 straps, different organizations. That fight might happen, maybe. Depending on where Crawford is at in his career. Crawford's looking for that big payday with Canelo, and it looks like that fight might happen in September, which would be more of a mega type showdown, kind of the Canelo Jermell Charlo, where it's kind of that mega fight status versus in a fan-friendly status rather than a meaningful fight within the respective division as far as legacy and titles and so forth. So Vergil Ortiz gets the decision in what was a tightly contested fight with Madrimov, where both of these fighters left it all out in the ring and brought the pain to each other, delivered punches and bunches, delivered pain. Every single punch had bad intentions, and they damaged each other, and you could see the damage that each fighter incurred when the fight was all said and done. Vergil Ortiz gets the decision. Very valiant effort by both of them. And again, we see Vergil Ortiz, he doesn't know how to be in a bad fight. He doesn't know how to give you a bad fight. This was not to the level of Ortiz Boachuk, but it was right there. Another entertaining showing. And of course, for Madrimov, he's now become a fan favorite fighter, where when you see Israil Madrimov on the card, you know it's going to be a hell of a fight, because he brings a fight to you. He's a little bit more elusive than Vergil Ortiz. Vergil Ortiz is just fast with his combinations, fast hands, fast combinations, and bringing the fight to his opponent. Madrimov tries to be a lot more elusive, has the better footwork of the two, and is very good at mixing up his attack himself, but does those looping hooks to the temple, similar to something that we would see from Gennady Golovkin, where he does those looping punches to the forehead and to the temple. That's the only other person I've seen do it, and that was Gennady Golovkin. And Israil Madrimov executes those punches to perfection as well. These guys left it all out there, hurt each other, and that to me was the fight of the night. That to me, Vergil Ortiz and Madrimov stole the show. Many feel that Callum Smith and Joshua Buatsi was the fight of the night. To me, it was Vergil Ortiz and Israil Madrimov. Congrats to Vergil Ortiz, who is now basically near the top of the division, just waiting to see what's going to happen with Sebastian Fundora and Cordell Booker. And if he's not able to negotiate with Sebastian Fundora or Cordell Booker, whoever the winner is, we may very well be in line to see a rematch between Vergil Ortiz and Serhiy Boachuk. And that would be a fight that you want to get your plane ticket and get your tickets and go see it live. You don't want to miss that if we do end up getting a rematch between these two. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch their first fight with one another last August. The last fight that we got to talk about on this last crescendo was the middleweight ascension of the young Hamza Shiraz getting a title shot against Dominican champion, WBC champion, Carlos Adames. Carlos Adames, not the most active of champions, but he is a champion that has been willing to engage. He was a lot more active trying to get to the title. Now that he has a title, this was the second defense of his title, if I remember correctly, and he ends up retaining his title by way of a draw. The judges end up deeming the fight a draw. Hamza Shiraz was the favorite to win this fight, and when the fight started, within the first 4 rounds, it looked like Hamza Shiraz was going to take control of this fight. He's a special fighter, a special young fighter, where when the fight was getting within the first half of the fight, in my head, I was already playing a scenario of Hamza Shiraz and Janibek. What would that fight look like? Hamza doesn't abandon his height. He doesn't fight down to his opponent's height. He doesn't fight to the opponent's level. He knows how to fight tall. He's a tall fighter with a long reach, long range punching, and he doesn't abandon that at all. Very in tune with what his coach Ricky Funes is communicating to him, and he applies it. Most fighters you'll see will give in to one thing or another because of the ego or the pride taking over at some point during the fight. We see Sebastian Fundora abandon his height and start fighting low. We saw it with Tim Tszyu. He starts fighting low and just willing to exchange at the level of his opponent. Hamza Shiraz does not do that at all. Now, the downfall for that was that Carlos Adames started figuring out to break between the guard. By keeping his guard high, he was able to continue to deliver body shots that were damaging Hamza Shiraz as the fight continued, where Carlos Adames started stacking up rounds to his favor. that ended up complicating the fight, and every so often, by damaging Hamza to the body, he was able to drop the guard of Hamza Shiraz in exchange and then deliver that right hand to Hamza Shiraz, where Shiraz's left side of his face was pretty heavily swollen and damaged. Carlos Adames, the veteran between the two, it was a veteran versus a young fighter, and you saw the experience level here. It was a great experience for Shiraz, and it was a great performance by Carlos Adames, who showed the veteranship and who showed his stripes in the ring, and he needed them. And in the end, it complicated the scorecards, and it was deemed a draw. The title does not change hands. We see that Hamza Shiraz walks away with a lot of experience under his belt, doesn't necessarily get a loss, no blemish to his record, but now he's fought one of the champions, and he's fought at the championship level as a young fighter. He jumped leaps from prospect to contender to now a championship challenger. Carlos Adames retains the title since it doesn't switch on a draw. Let's hope that we see Carlos Adames and Janibek this year. That's also one of the fights that I listed on my list. If Carlos Adames is not going to try to unify with Janibek, who has 2 of the 4 titles at 160 at middleweight, then let's see Carlos Adames go after Erislandy Lara and try to unify himself. This is a very good showing by Carlos Adames, retains the title since it doesn't switch hands by way of a draw. This is a huge opportunity for him that he needs to capitalize on and either get that big payday against Janibek and there will be 3 titles on the line there, or go after the elder champion in Erislandy Lara and make a fight with the Cuban fighter and try to get that title. If he does, an even bigger payday will be awaiting for him with all 4 titles on the line against Janibek. Janibek is calling for anybody and everybody. He wants to fight Benavidez at 175. He wants to fight Canelo at 168. He wants all the smoke because he can't get anybody to fight him at 160. Let's hope we see Carlos Adames and Janibek, or at the minimum, Carlos Adames go get that title from Erislandy Lara, who is the older fighter, who is on the back end of his career, and who has been basically, in my opinion, holding that WBA title hostage for quite a bit. And that's it. The Last Crescendo. That's the recap of the Last Crescendo. Almost 50 minutes again. I mean, here we go. When we get talking boxing, we just go and there's no stopping. I really appreciate you guys tuning in once again. And let me know what you guys think. Leave me a comment. Which one was the fight of the night for you? I just said Vergil Ortiz Madrimov was my favorite fight of the night. You let me know which one was your favorite fight of the night, or at least which one stole the fight of the night, which one stole the show in your opinion. But I mean, if you tell me Beterbiev Bivol, then yes, hands down. I'm not going to disagree with you. I just thought the action-packed fight, in my opinion, was between Ortiz and Madrimov. I think if they awarded a fight of the night type award, that would be the one that I would award it to. But of course, the main event, we all won. Not just the fighters in the ring. I mean, holy crap, the fans. That's what we want. And what a pleasure it was to have witnessed Dmitry Bivol and Artur Beterbiev step into the ring against one another once again. What an enjoyable fight it was, and we got to see it for a second time, and now a trilogy is looming. So we get to see them once again step into the ring against each other. Fighters that are 1A, 1B right there. They're just a couple punches away from creating a separation between the two. They are that good. So thank you guys again for tuning in. Many more episodes to come your way, and I hope you enjoyed this recap. It was a big card with a lot of fights. Of course, it was going to be a long episode. Thank you guys for tuning in, for the love, for the support. And if you find it in your heart and you're listening to this through YouTube or via YouTube, please consider subscribing. Help me grow the channel. The more the channel grows, the more doors that are going to open to the Toma Todito Boxing show and podcast. And let's hope I could bring you some live coverage from some events as we progress through 2025, through this calendar year. Thank you guys again. Have yourselves a great night, and I'll talk to you all in the next episode. Take care.